so for those of you that don't know what an athletic therapist is, it's sort of a combination of a strength coach, a physio, a massage therapist, a personal trainer. So we are often on the sidelines. So if you watch like a sporting event, there's a person with a fanny pack, that's an athletic therapist, or the US an athletic trainer. So they're there from when an injury happens all the way up until getting you back into participating better than you were before. So we do like first responder, first aid. We do prepare to perform, which is what I'm going to talk about today. So pre-injury, and then we help people all the way to post-injury and getting you better than you were before you were in pain. So I've worked for years with Field Hockey Canada, and then I work now regularly with a couple of high schools in the city. So working with their young athletes through injury and also helping them get better. So I work with the Reynolds Soccer Academy and the Esquimalt High Rugby Academy. And then I work at a private clinic. So that's the Athlete Center. And we're located in the Apex building on Cary there near Uptown. So I take private clients that are injured and that are not injured. So people say, oh, I'm not an athlete, like you can't help me. I'm like, all of you guys are athletes. The fact that you're here and you're taking this on, that makes you an athlete. You are, and I think that once a week athletes are probably my most common, like, you know, like you guys and like guys that go play hockey once a week, those are the people that I love to help and that I help. So I just want to help you keep doing your activity. So what we're going to talk about today is strength training for running and walking. So there's sort of two reasons that we want to do strength training if running and walking is our goal. One is make it better, make it easier, performance. The other one is injury prevention. I'm pretty sure you guys have someone that's going to come talk more specific about injury care and injury prevention. So even though that's also one of my specialties, I'm going to try to push that to the side a little bit today and focus on sort of the performance and how strength training can make you a better runner, walker, more efficient. If you guys have questions as I go, throw your hand up and ask. I'm also going to sort of make sure we have a little bit of time right before we finish that you can ask questions. So I'll start with sort of thinking of the most common questions that runners have or walkers have when it comes to strength conditioning. So one of them is, if I get big bulky muscles, will it slow me down? Well, first of all, to get big bulky muscles, you're going to have to lift frequently, a lot of weight for a long time, and eat lots. So if you're training right, you don't have to worry about that. Second, it's not going to slow you down. If anything, it's going to make you faster. So it can actually change, strength training and doing it right, can change the way that your muscles work, and then it makes them stiffer. So if you picture an elastic band, an old, floppy, stretched out elastic band, you're not going to get much power from it, right? If you stretch it out, you're not going to get a lot of spring bend. Think of a brand new elastic band that's stiff. That's a muscle that's been strength trained. So the more you pull it, the stiffer it is when you pull it, it's going to spring back right away. So a little bit of stiffness in your muscles and tendons that comes from strength training can get more power with every single muscle contraction, so every single step. Another thing that we can do with strength training is improve our running economy. So when we talk about running economy, that's basically how well our body uses oxygen when we're walking and running. So the better running economy that you have, the less oxygen that you need to move forward. So basically what I'm saying is it's going to make running easier, or you'll be able to run or walk at a higher pace or a higher level with less effort if you're strength trained. One of the next ones that's more common, and I guess this is leading a bit more towards injury prevention, but increases bone density. So running and walking increase bone density, but strength training can also increase bone density in that as you lift weight or move weight, your muscles and tendons pull on your bones, and that stimulates more bone growth. So that can lead to injury prevention in that we have fewer chances or lower chance of bone injury, so like stress fractures, which is probably the most common one in the shins or the feet. It also can increase your tolerance to load. So overall strength training is addition to training, right? So let's say you're doing 2 or 3 runs or walks a week. So your body will get used to doing that. And then when you try to add more volume, that can be hard on your body. So another way to add volume or load or overall training is strength training. So we can increase how much our body can do without overstressing it. because as you guys know, that's a little bit of a fine line, right? And if anyone has any more questions about the why, let me know. But I want to move over to the how and the what. So if I don't have you convinced, ask me at the end, but hopefully that's enough to convince you a little bit. So what are we gonna do to strength training? Okay, there's these reasons that I'm gonna do it. Well, when it comes to running and performance, there's 3 main muscle groups we want to focus on. The injury prevention side is going to tell you a little bit more probably detail about this, but we want to work on our glute group, so our butt muscles. We want to work on our quads, so our big thigh muscles, and then our calves. So we've got 3 major groups, and I'll often group the hamstrings in with the glutes because those are our hip extensors. So the glutes, the hamstrings, and the calves, those 3 work together to help us push off in the back. And then our quads, our thigh muscles, they do knee straightening. So they're gonna help that push off as well. So when it comes to running for performance, those are the main groups that we want to strengthen. So that would be the knee extensors, the hip extensors, and the ankle toe pointers, we'll call them, plantar flexors. So how are we gonna strengthen those? So there's 2 things to think about. One is our exercise choice. So what exercises are we going to do? What strength resistance training exercises do we choose? And then what kind of volume, frequency, intensity sets and reps do we choose? So when it comes to running and walking, or honestly any endurance sport, so like I said, I work with a lot of like soccer players and field hockey players, they do a lot of running too. So people say, okay, well I should do endurance weightlifting. I should do low weight, I should do really high reps, because that's going to mimic my sport. Well, you're already doing that. That's what your sport is. So endurance weights is probably not going to be the right choice. What you want to focus on is strength weights. So what that means is lower reps, maybe medium amount of sets, and higher weight. Now, if you're new to strength training, you're going to start with a low amount of weight and work your way up. But doing like 40 body weight squats is not going to necessarily be the best choice for you, and we're not going to get those same goals for performance that I talked about in the beginning. So we're going to want to aim for 3 to 4 sets, so 3 or 4 rounds of somewhere between 5 to 8 repetitions of a fairly challenging weight. So that's going to go for any of these exercises that we talk about. So what I usually recommend people start with is pick some exercises that you're comfortable with, get good at them, and then start to add weight to them. Okay, and that's where my job is to help people with that, is figure out what exercises work for their body, what they're comfortable with, and then sort of teach them how to increase the load and increase the total weight without injuring yourself. So let's talk about what exercises. So if I said hip extensors, plantar flexors, so calf muscles and quads, really we could pick 3 exercises. So a hip extension exercise would be a hip thrust or a deadlift. And then a knee extensor exercise could be a squat, a split squat, or a lunge. And then a calf exercise, pretty standard, 2-leg calf raise or a bent knee calf raise. So this is something that not a lot of people know. We actually have 2 major muscles back here. One that goes across the knee and one that doesn't. So we're going to actually be working that muscle differently if I do a calf raise like this, or if I sit down with weight on my knees and I do it like this. So how much time do we need to spend on these? For you guys, probably 2 to 3 days of 20 to 30 minutes. So you don't have to go to the gym every day and spend an hour in there. So I just gave you 3 exercises. Pick those 3 and spend some time doing 3 to 4 rounds of 5 to 8 reps of some heavy resistance. Now that's a super basic outline. If we want to incorporate the rest of the body, of course we can add in some core, we can add in some upper body. When it comes to upper body stuff, I recommend using a horizontal push, a horizontal pull, and a vertical push and a vertical pull. So we can think of that as a push-up or a bench press, a row, a overhead press with free weight, and then a pull-up or a lat pull down. So there's really 4 upper body exercises as if you were wanting to do full body, but as I said, you guys can focus on, for performance, just those 3 lower bodies. So I'm gonna go over a deadlift. So a deadlift is a hip hinge, okay? So we wanna have this nice and straight, and that motion is primarily coming from our hip. So it's going to look like that. So that would be our hip extension exercise, and we could do it on one leg if we wanted to focus one leg only. And then a squat and a lunge, so our regular squats would look like that. And then this is a split squat. And then a lunge is where we're gonna step back into it and back out. So there's different ways to use weight. So to increase your load, you can have it in your hands here, you can have it in your hands here, you can have it in your bar. And again, that part is sort of what I do one-on-one coaching with people. So what works best for you, based on your body, based on your experience, based on your injury history. So I think that's probably an outline. I wanted to give you guys sort of a basic split. Let's say I'm in this group with you guys and I have 2 days a week that I'm gonna add strength training. Ideally, you would add your strength training after you did your run walk. Because for you guys, your run walk, that's your focus. That's what you're trying to get good at. So you wanna do that first. I know for scheduling, that's not always ideal. So if you have to do them both on the same day, ideally you have like 3 hours in between for recovery. But again, I know that's not a hard, fast rule because life doesn't necessarily allow for that kind of thing. But if you lived in a perfect world, you do your running or your walking before your strength training and you give it a 3-hour gap. Or you do them on different days if you've got time for that as well. So on day A, I might do a squat, a deadlift, a single leg calf raise, and a bent over row. And then on day B, I might do a push-up, a split squat, a seated calf raise, and then a hamstring curl. So all that stuff might take me half an hour to do 5 reps of 4 sets. At what I would recommend, somewhere between 50 to 80% of your maximum. So again, that's the part that people are sometimes scared about if you've never lifted weight before. So you're not gonna go straight to your 80%. So let's say I could squat 100 pounds one time, so then 80 pounds one time would be my 80%. So that's sort of how you calculate that. And again, that's something that I recommend you work with someone to determine. I think that's everything. Does anyone have questions? First of all, any more questions about why we should do it? I wanted to quote my favorite study. Again, I know I'm not here to necessarily talk about injury prevention, but one of my favorite studies that I like to quote, because people are always asking me, do you have a stretch for this? Do you have a stretch for this? Well, stretching is not going to be my first choice for anything. So, what year was this? I could quote the year and the author of the study, but you guys probably don't care about that. Basically, if they took a large group of runners and they had some of them do stretching, some of them do balance and proprioceptive training, and some of them do strength training. And the people that did strength training had a 69% decrease in injury risk. The people that just did stretching had a 4% decrease in injury risk. And then the people that did balance, I think it was like 46 in between. So if you're gonna choose between spending your time stretching or spending your time strength training, I think those numbers sort of speak for that decision. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with stretching if that feels good and that's like how you want to spend your time, but you're gonna get more bang for your buck in performance and injury risk reduction with strength training. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about exercise selection? I can even go over some finer points of like certain moves. Yeah.
The seated calf raises, are you actually sitting down with doing that, and then you just have to be on your knees?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Some gyms have like machines that you sit down and it's got like a big pad that goes across your thighs and you can put like weights on it. But like at home, I have a kettlebell and I just put a kettlebell on my knee and then just do the calf raise while I'm sitting in a chair. Yeah, and that's gonna target a bit more of like our deeper calf muscles. So if you have a history of like plantar fasciitis or Achilles issues, that's a really important one to include. question. So I'm gonna say kettlebell just because I'm a huge fan. And you can buy kettlebells that like they have pieces that clip in, and they'll range anywhere between like I think 8 kilos and maybe like 40 kilos. They're pretty expensive, but it's still cheaper than buying like 5. So kettlebells is gonna be my answer. Maybe even 2, like just 2 weights, because there's always the option of doing things that are single leg. So if I'm gonna do a double leg squat and I have like say 40% of my weight, well if I do a single leg squat or a lunge, that weight might be closer to my 80%. So usually, again, that'll be something that I'll coach people with. I'll say, okay, well what kind of equipment do you have at home? What do you have access to? Then that's how we're gonna choose our exercise selection. If you've only got low weights, then we might do a lot of single-sided stuff. And you can make stuff. I've seen people get so creative over the pandemic. I taught a lot of like 2 laundry detergent jug exercises, or like holding a bag of flour squats. Like I did that a lot over the last 2 years. So you can Google some stuff and there's people doing interesting things. Yeah, I think a kettlebell is going to be my answer. Good question though. Anyway, yeah.
What about if you have resistance bands?
Bands? I think that it's hard to get the amount of resistance with a band. You could probably maybe a couple heavier bands, but you can, yeah. I prefer weights over bands, especially since the band, when you move through a range, you're getting different amounts of resistance. Let's say for a squat, if I had the band wrapped around, I don't even know how you would do it with a squat. You'd have it over your shoulders actually, and you'd be standing on it to squat up. And so you're gonna have it, it's gonna be really easy down here, and then it'll get harder on the way up. Yeah, you can do it with bands, you definitely have to get more creative. I don't know if that helps. Bands are definitely easier for upper body stuff, harder to add resistance to our lower body. So when we run, because of the speed and the force, and even when we walk, I don't have the numbers in my head for walking, but when we run, depending on the literature that you read, 4 to 10 times your body weight is going through your quads, calves, and ankles, or quads, hamstrings, and calves. So if we're using like a weight that's only 10 pounds, we're not going to get enough of a stimulus to make a big change. So that's why we want a higher load. Because every time I land, when I'm running, I'm getting, so let's say 500 pounds through my calf. Now I'm not saying you need to calf raise 500 pounds, but that's one of the reasons why we want a higher weight. Cool. Any other questions? I know you guys are itching to get out in the cold. Yeah.
What's the hamstring exercise look like without a curl?
Very good question. So this is actually one of the best hamstring exercises, and you don't need any equipment. It's called the Nordic Curl. Joanna, how do you help me? So this is like very, very well researched. Probably one of the most researched exercises out there for injury prevention and performance. Do you know how to do a Nordic Curl? You're not gonna have to do it. So you're gonna hold my ankles. So you're gonna hold right here. So there's 2 ways you can do this. So one is I'm gonna go as far forward as I can, and I'm gonna catch myself in a push-up position. So, and I have a very trusting friend. So hamstrings are gonna keep my hips locked here, and they're gonna keep this knee flexion. So mine are working. Now they're failing. So that's one. The other option is I only go until I can. For me, that's not very far. And then back up. So this is like exceeding my max. I can't even do it. Thank you, that's good. So that's probably like the #1 hamstring exercise. A lot of people don't like it because it kind of hurts to kneel. But I'll usually like tell people, fold up a towel, throw it under your knees. But that's a very good question. Yeah.
Just a question about, should you be doing this group training on different days that you run?
So you could do them on the same day. Ideally, you do your running or your walking before, at least 3 hours before, if you can. But if you do them on different days, that's totally fine. But if you're doing, depending on your life schedule, but the absolute ideal is after you walk or run, at least 3 hours. Yeah.
Is that because you don't have enough energy to do
sure. And especially if we're starting to increase the weights and get into that like 80 to 100. And again, we want to do the running and the walk before because you don't want to be tired or drained when you're trying to do your actual practice. Yeah, so you want to put most of your focus into your run walk. The strength training is kind of a bonus, right? That's a good question. Anyone else? Yeah.
One more variation on the hamstring. Do you have any other exercises you can recommend other than that? How you usually
So the Nordic Curl, the other one would be, so this is a hip thrust, and this is going to be a bit more glute and hamstring specific. So I'm going to put my shoulders on the edge of the chair, and then I have my kettlebell or my sack of flour or my barbell here. Oftentimes I have people start with nothing, so you get used to the movement. But basically, so I want to keep my core tight, so I'm not arching my low back. So I keep my lower ribs heavy down. So then I'm going to drop my hips down to the floor. If I start to arch my low back, it's not going to be happy. I'm going to make sure I keep sort of my tailbone tucked under, and then dropping hips down, and then coming up to sort of like this tabletop position. So this is a vertical hip hinge. So you can have your weights. You could use a band in this scenario. So a band would go anchored onto the floor, over top of my hips, down, and up like that. So that's a hip thrust. Yeah.
And do you want your weight distributed evenly on your foot?
Yeah, the whole, from right to left. If you lift your toes up and dig your heels down, it's going to be a little bit more hamstrings actually.
Okay.
If you keep your toes down, you're going to feel it a little bit more in here balanced, front to back. Good question. Anything else? Yeah.
Is there a chance that the recording we're doing could be sent to us?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. We'll see what file size it is. I can probably make that happen. Yeah. Awesome. Good. Thanks for having me. And again, I'm at the Athlete Center, so we're on the Apex. We're in the Apex building on Cary. So as an athletic therapist, I'm certified and registered. So if you have extended medical coverage for athletic therapy, everyone's insurance is different, but a lot of people have coverage, so they can come and see me and have it covered by their insurance. So it's kind of awesome because it's basically personal training.